Hello, hello. Welcome back for another Humpday Q&A.
Hi.
Hang on. I still have stay tuned. There we go. That's better. I have some music. Hang on. This is all new technology. One second. There we go. We're here. Another Humpday Q&A. Scott,
thanks for letting me just stop by.
So Scott had a little emergency he's had to deal with, so we're starting without Scott. So Steph's here. Hey, Steph. Welcome.
Hey, how are you? I didn't just stop by because Scott needed to step away.
No, but yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. So I'm just going to go through our little introduction. So we've got Matan and Keven joining us. I'm probably pronouncing it completely terribly. He's going to tell me after a minute. Right. Anyway, so quick do's and don'ts. Be nice, respectful, and constructive whilst interacting in the YouTube chat and all the usual. Don't post anything adult content, rude or offensive. Don't advertise, promote. Don't spam or post the same thing again and again. If you post your question again, it will get moved to the bottom of the list. It's just the way the system works. So yeah, just letting you know. And we also, it's just really annoying to just see the same question answered over and over again. We queue them all up. We get to them as best as quick as we can. So yeah.
And
any harassment.
Put a Q in front of your question.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Steph. So we do want a Q in front of your questions. So our question magician Randall can identify your questions. And just last point here, any harassment is not tolerated, and failing to do this will block you from the chat and block you from other Flutter community related things. So you don't want to be doing that. Right. Let's get on with the fun stuff. So the fun stuff now is all about us. So, us and our gracious guests that are coming. So, my name's Simon Lightfoot. I'm a community leader and I'm CTO at Dev Andrews London, and you can follow me on Twitter at Dev Andrews London. I'll do Scott as well since he's not here. Scott is also a community leader and organizer GG Cleveland. He also works at Dev Andrews London now, and you can follow him at Scott Stoll 2017. Steph, do you want to hang on? Let's get you on screen here. Hey, there we go.
Hi.
Steph, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Stephanie Patterson. I am one of the co-managers of the Flutteristas. I am also a tech editor for the Flutter Apprentice book and tech editor and final pass editor at raywenderlake.com articles.
These are lots of titles. If you were if you were like a royalty, you would be just like, they normally do like the statements, they just like keep reading them out and you're like, when do these titles ever end? You know, this would be you. Right?
I didn't put in there, and by day I'm a SQL Server developer.
Just everything, right? And then let's get Randall. Randall, welcome.
Hey, hi, good to be back again. I know it's been so long, like maybe since last week. I'll be the question magician. I'll be the question magician, as Simon said. If you're live in the chat, which you should be, don't be watching this later. Come on the live show. And you can put questions by putting a Q colon in front of it. Then I see those right away and add those to our queue. I am a Flutter Google developer, so in theory, I also might be able to answer some of the questions as well.
And I think we're going to have you back on the show for our guests. And let's introduce the guests. And it's Matan. Hello, Matan. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to be here.
There we go. Yeah, welcome. So you're a tech lead at Google, and I hear you've been using Dart since early 2014. So you're a seasoned Dart user, more than most.
I've definitely been using it since Dart editor. If anybody remembers using the original like Eclipse-based Dart editor, that's been a long time.
I'm not even that old in Dart, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
There we go. That's what I mean.
It's amazing. Keven, let's we also joined by Keven. There you go, Keven. Welcome to the stream.
I am now forevermore going to produce Matan with your wonderful British accent.
Is that what it sounds like? Put
the emphasis on the first syllable.
Syllable? How do you pronounce it? How'd you pronounce it?
No, Matan. But like what you said, it was totally respectful. It was just it's funny. That's it.
It's in my British ears. It all sounds the same. So what can I say?
You're the only accent I can make fun of, Simon.
Oh no, you can.
We call it the King's English now.
Oh yeah, right.
We call it the King's English.
Yes. Sorry about the Queen.
No.
Long live the King. There you go.
Boy, and
yeah.
To Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
She it's kind of interesting. I just quickly briefly mention this that
No, honestly, wait, Simon, I'm curious. I'm sure lots are. Like, I don't know people. Like, I guess I haven't talked to Tim about it. He's also from the UK, but I'm curious. Like, again, 30 seconds is the tech thing, but I don't, what's it like?
We'll get to the tech thing in a second, but I'm kind of so I'd say like the general consensus that I get from a lot of people that I know is that obviously there's people that really like role fanatics and they do whatever they want to do, and you have people that on the complete other end of the spectrum, they're like, work who the roles, don't care, right? Like, so this is completely, but most of the population I think fit in that very middle sort of gray area, which is like they respect the royal family and what they do. They don't have any sort of direct involvement, but what the royal family actually do in terms of bringing tourism and all this kind of stuff into the economy. They also run all the public parks. They essentially own all the public land, and there's a whole thing around that. But the money that's earned, they actually spend back on maintaining all the land and doing all the property. So it's not like it all circulates. They don't pay taxes because they'll be taxing themselves, right? That just doesn't make sense, right? Like, so the money stays there, and then that gets divvied back out to sort of public services, right? So anyway. But they can sort of say what people think about. I think a lot of people feel that there's a little void left in their lives, because she was one constant from many generations. She's kind of been there, always been there. Suddenly she's gone, right? So it's like any movement, but I think doubly so for quite a few people, because it's weird because there's not a direct family member, but they know so much about them, right?
All right. Anyway, sorry.
Very interesting. But anyway, let's get on with the technology. That's what people are here for. So briefly, because I know, Steph, you're going to have to drop out in a minute, but I want to cover, you said you've got an announcement. So what's that announcement?
I do have an announcement. I am so happy to announce that the 3rd edition of Flutter Apprentice is available today. We have updated it to Flutter 3.3 and Dart 2.18. And the even best part is the first 6 chapters are free today. And when you get to, for those people who choose to buy or have the subscription for the book, or already have it, chapters 7 and 8 have been updated for Go Router.
Nice.
Free stuff.
Go Router.
Now, your mic is really hot there, Scott. I don't know what's happening. Well,
how's that?
No. It's picking up. I don't think it's picking up that mic. It's picking up a different mic.
Oh, all right. I will get on that. That's probably the fan from my laptop. Everything is going wrong over here today. I'll be back.
I think the gain is just a little too high on the mic. I think it sounded like that mic was quite a bit high. Maybe it was just me. It felt a bit hot to me. Anyway. So sorry, Steph. Yes. So
yes.
Flutter Apprentice 3rd edition. Yes. Brilliant. Yep. That's great. So
Can you put up the URL?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
So put the screen back up and put the URL.
There you go. Look, there you go. Look,
there we go.
Look. It's like we designed this, right? Like it actually happened.
It's not like we threw this together in the last 20 minutes. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say anything until it was actually available and announced. I've known about it for a while, but
Well, I hope you did. You worked on it.
Yes. Took a while. We went through. Everything has been updated. There are things that we want to also there's more updates, but we're trying really quickly to get it through, to get it updated. Initially, we started with Flutter 3, but then when Flutter 3.3, I'm kind of like watching and going, okay. So I reached out to Tim, and I did all of my testing and stuff was on Flutter 3.3 beta. And then when it was announced last week, we went back, Cesare went back through, made sure that everything was still working okay. So the book's been updated, the materials have been updated. We do have a bigger update. We're going to do additional stuff later. We're taking a little break right now. But anyway, so yes, very excited. There's been a lot of people like, okay, are you going to update this for Flutter 3? And people think that it's a real quick update, but it's not, because we have to go through, you see this on the here. The book is 700 pages. So it takes us a little while to go through the book. And it may actually be a little longer than that.
Wait, have you got the Dart book?
Yes, I do have okay. Yeah. Oops, hold on. I put the Google cover on my paper cover. Sorry. Okay, so this is Dart Apprentice.
Hey, there you go.
An update. We're working on that. And here's Flutter Apprentice.
Okay,
So
what
it's meant to be the
you're
other way
telling me-
around.
You know what's
Kevin
really
will tell
great?
you this is you could fill a book like this with Dart and this much with Flutter.
Well, no, what was great is we originally, when we first started Flutter Apprentice, it was supposed to be a traditional apprentice book, real small, doing this. But as we got going, we're like, nope, we're going to make this into a full big book. And it originally, so first edition was actually this big. But then when we updated it for the book club last year, we added
you
chapter
can go watch
19.
on this very channel.
Exactly.
Wow.
So we updated it chapter 19 to have the Firebase. And so it got even thicker. So
Well, don't
anyway.
worry on the Dart side. Once we add records and patterns, we'll add a good amount of.
Yeah.
I just
Oh,
talked
Wait.
to Bob
Kevin
last
is
night.
giving away the secrets of the Dart side.
Right.
They're not secret.
Aren't you supposed to
No,
have
no,
like,
no,
the
no.
master
All of my
permission for
secrets.
that?
You just need to watch the Dartlang SDK repo and watch the commits go by.
Yep.
No secrets.
Yeah, we all have time
That's
to do
kinda
that.
how-
Thank you.
It's all hidden in obscurity, but if you watch the SDK repo, you can see everyone's working on it.
And that's how we worked. So Vincent, who updated chapters 7 and 8, actually he did all of them, but he's the one that updated. He didn't do all the chapters. Oh my goodness. Each of the original authors updated their chapters. Vincent rewrote chapter 7 and 8, and he was watching through the Go router GitHub and just making sure we were up to date and got all of that. So it's pretty awesome. I had not, admittedly, I was just so busy with so many other things. I haven't gotten into and using Go router. I loved the updates that he did, and I loved how straightforward and everything that he did. So I'm really excited for people to take a look at it. Everyone who's already purchased the online version, yours is updated automatically.
Awesome.
A quick question has come in, and we'll just get you answer to this.
And yeah, then
do
I
you
have to
help translate the amazing books to Spanish.
Oh.
Is the answer just email us, right? No.
Right now, there aren't any plans, but I can take that back and just say we've had this request. I don't know if any of the RayWenderlich.com books have multiple languages. I don't recall that we do. Yeah, I don't.
The problem is with this, right? It's like you imagine how difficult it's translating an app, but translating an entire book. Once you make one change, you gotta make sure it's translated and updated everywhere.
It would be like
really
multiple teams, and I don't know the feasibility. I'm not saying no. I can't speak directly for Raceware and Ray Wenderlich. So anyway,
see how we go.
Are there any other questions before I have to dart back to the day job?
I don't think anything else is coming right now.
Well, thank you so much for letting me just say, hey, can I stop by today?
Yes,
I've got a quick one.
Yes.
The fact that there's a regular cover and a Google cover, does that mean you're white labeling the book?
No. So originally, we had this cover and we used this artwork, and then we had some revisions and things that were happening. And so then we had a book cover that was dedicated to Google for the purchase that they amazingly did. And when they endorsed our book and bought it for the world for 3 months last year, thank you, Google, very much. It was amazing. It was a goal of mine. Never thought, because I was really hard on the tech editors and like, we are going to get Google's endorsement. Never expecting it, just because we hadn't seen anything like that before. So then when I got word, and Tim just like, I made me cry, literally. I just was so excited by the fact that Google bought it. And then the book club went great. We met every week for October to December. It was fantastic. So and I just I'm so proud of it. I printed it and I stick it on the current edition, but as you see, it comes off.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Anyway, yes,
we're going to crack on. But,
okay. Talk to you later. Thanks for letting me drop by. It's good to see everybody.
No
Bye.
See you soon. Bye. That was definitely. So, Right, Keven, Matan. I'm saying it wrong again, aren't I?
You're doing
Yeah.
fine. Don't worry.
It's fine. Go for it.
So let's get rid of that. That's in the way. Right. Right. So Keven, like we've had you on the show before. We know that you're heavily in the Dart world. Did you recently?
I'm actually spending more of my time in the Flutter world these days.
This is what I was going to say. So you originally was just a Dart product manager, weren't you? And then you went into
because there was no Flutter. Yeah.
Right. But was it when Flutter came out you went into Flutter? Because I've had a feeling that you've always had a kind of a focus on Dart. Was that just me? Am I just imagining?
No, that's true. I when Flutter Web, we started doing so I was even when Flutter was around, I was still Dart focused. When Flutter Web came along, I was a product manager for Flutter Web because I owned and helped manage all the web stuff on the Dart side. So it was a natural extension. And then I adopted kids and had a baby. It was crazy. And so Miriam took over the Flutter Web stuff, and I went and had kids. And then I came back.
Right. Yeah.
And then I came back. I was very Dart focused because I was null safety. I was helping null safety land.
Yeah. That's
and
what I'm
then
thinking.
Miriam decided to go have kids, and then I took Flutter Web back over, and that has been the case for now for.
Does this mean if there's a problem on anything in Dart or Flutter, we get to blame you?
No, only on the website. Only on the website.
Only on web. Right, gotcha.
So the Dart.js compilation or Flutter Web, loads. Yeah, I'm the guy who you come to on that side.
Well, I mean, this takes me back to
Flutter Dart. It's me.
Well, this kind of takes me back to the very beginning of Dart, right? So Matan. So when you picked up Dart, what was your reasoning for that? Was there a direction you just trying it out? What sort of got you involved in Dart?
I didn't get a choice. So that's the real answer, right? So when I started at Google in 2014, we were using a very early version of Dart, and there wasn't another option on the current team I was on, right? So it was sort of similar to JavaScript, similar to Java. People could navigate around it, but it wasn't. I was on probably one of the few teams that it wasn't a choice, right? So.
That reminds me of this reminds me of like the very early days of when you do C development, right? Where there was no IntelliSense, right? You just at the very beginning you couldn't command click on something or navigate. There was no analysis server. There's none of this kind of stuff. It's just was it like that? Was it the very beginning?
By the time I picked it up, the tooling was quite good. I've heard people talking about early days when there was syntax highlighting if you were lucky. But when I started, there was I think I was saying on the before the show. I was using Dart editor, right? It was Eclipse based, like hard coded for Dart. We had a custom version of Chrome called Dartium, which was Chrome with the Dart VM embedded inside of it that just mostly leaked memory, but it didn't work also. Keven, I think the debugger would stop working in both Eclipse and in Dartium every other release. What else? Compilation time, like when you use it in Dartium, right? It ran Dart code natively, so it was quite quick. But if you wanted to compile it to JavaScript, you went and got several cups of coffee and came back.
So Kevin's been doing his job. Is that what we're trying to say? Kevin's actually been making things faster and better along the way.
I can't take any credit for any of that. Lots of smart people, but it's so interesting. And again, we could dive into this forever. So supporting the Dartium. So we were in the Chrome org, and there were folks on our team very diligently saying we should get Dart into Chrome. And of course, I think it's okay. Actually, now that Eric Seidel left Google, it's even easier, right? Like folks like Eric Seidel were trying to represent the web platform very earnestly and correctly. And they're like, it's a bad idea to add another language to Chrome. We have to worry about versioning and maintaining it, and the standards, like getting Safari and Firefox ever to adapt it would be dubious. And so rarely do
not to mention Apple just completely, right?
So rarely do I quote religious country music, but there's this whole thing thank God for unanswered prayers kind of thing. I honestly think it's a blessing that Dart never got into Chrome because the maintenance overhead and all that, and so it turns out, and what's interesting is to have a fast development cycle in a browser without Dartium, you needed incremental compilation, which is why Dart became sound. That was the main impetus for Dart becoming a sound typed language, because without sound typing, you can't do modular compilation. you need all world analysis if you can't trust the text. And so the reason Dart became sound was because we weren't in Chrome. And then what's nice is because we did the work to become sound, that means we actually had a much better native compilation story, which has enabled the performance allows us to have in Flutter. Like, and now we come back around to like native performance and like targeting WASM. Like it's all coming back around. Like it's a whole hilarious.
Doesn't it happen like this? There's like every 8 years kind of something circles around, right?
Hopefully not. Hopefully we keep heading, you know,
fashion or something
to the right. But, yeah, that's crazy.
Something you what did you? So my brain's completely on a different direction. You mentioned like the JavaScript compilation then having it in the browser. It just occurred to me that that would have been really difficult because as the standards for JavaScript, like ES6 and all the rest of that, as they start adding more features and so on, Dart has to fall in line if it's used as an alternative to a certain degree, I guess.
Well, yeah, and we'd want to version Dart, and right now if we version Dart, it doesn't break existing deployed Dart apps because we compile the JavaScript, right? It's like the C++ compiler evolves. You know, as long as you're doing good x86 or good ARM assembly, it doesn't matter if things, you know, if the languages that target evolve. And so having JavaScript as a target makes things way easier. So actually, the really interesting thing is we did heroic work with the Chrome team to introduce this thing called OilPan. And OilPan was this memory management model that was meant to unify a shared memory management model for the DOM and JavaScript and Dart, where we can use one garbage collector and coordinate garbage collectors. Now, Dart disappeared in that whole equation, but the OilPan work still exists. And it was hilarious because if you're trying to figure out, if you wanted to search about it, you search for Dart, Chrome, OilPan, and you get all these like news articles about like old cars in the 90s. It's like a Dodge Dart and like with leaky oil pans. It's hilarious. But OilPan still exists, and it actually has become a huge benefit to Chrome. So again, this total accident to support Dart is still something that's around and actually makes debugging and tracing memory leaks and things across the DOM much easier. The history is hilarious.
The whole history of Dart really is hilarious, though, right? Like when the original idea around Dart 1.0 barely represent what exists today. Barely represent.
Oh man, yeah.
There
Sorry,
are
you
some
should
people
remind me,
who still think it's a dead language because they haven't looked at it beyond Dart 1.0, though.
Yeah,
but anyway.
Initial impressions matter, right? It's hard to change people's initial opinions. But yeah, like we have a completely different story. And I see we should get to questions because I know we have limited time.
Yeah, we've got quite a few of them.
Maybe we'll get back into history with some of the questions.
See if we can get a question in here. The first one on the queue, let's just jump in straight for that. I remember speaking to Matan some years ago about dependency injection. You published an unofficial version of inject.dart. I was wondering how you guys deal with this issue internally. I assume it's with Basil or Basil.
So I'm going to make a bunch of wild assumptions here on the what the question actually means, and I'll try to answer that version of the question. Sorry about that. Okay, so people that don't know, I used to be really, really involved in dependency injection. It's on my list of things never to touch again, but I have been involved in it. I did actually publish a unofficial version of something I was prototyping internally. It was called inject.dart. It was, for people that don't know, like a dependency injection framework that was 100% code generated. So you never could call an API that maybe would throw. That was sort of the premise of it. You never get like a provider not found error. That would be impossible. It was modeled after the DI framework Dagger for Android, which does something very similar.
Oh, yeah.
Dagger 2. So I'm going to assume you're asking how we deal with dependency injection internally, not necessarily inject.dart. That's what I'm going to assume you're asking. The answer is it varies, right? So the answer is going to be everything's going to be it varies. Dependency injection is not a framework. It's just a convention, right? If you ever created a constructor before and took a class in your constructor, you did dependency injection. You may not have thought about it, but you did. I'm guessing you also have functions that take parameters. That's also a form of dependency injection, depending on how you get things to work, right? So that's my answer one. Answer two is there still is angular.dart internally. Obviously, it has its own dependency injection framework. Flutter has no lack of frameworks that try to do things with dependencies. They're all over the place. And then for like sort of command line code or web code, people do various things. I guess my really lazy answer is that something like inject.dart is still used internally in some apps. but it's not integral to any of them because it's not really doing anything that important.
It's something I've always said, like people like add these like huge dependencies and libraries for doing some simple basic things, which you can just do with a few lines of code. I mean, like I'm not saying that isn't a bad thing, but there's if you're going to depend on a library, then you depend on it fully, right? Like you wrap your entire patterns and ways around that. But then that's now part of your app, right?
Sorry, just looking at the questions here, and actually there's kind of a flow that makes sense.
Go for it.
Are there still web projects being actively written in Dart?
I love this question so much. So Google is an ad, you make a decent amount of money on ads. So I think you go actually ads.google.com. Yeah, ads.google.com. AdSense is 100% written in Dart, and it's not Flutter. It is what we used to call Angular.dart. So internally, the code name is ACX, and I don't even know what that means anymore. What is it? Ads component?
It was supposed to stand for ads component experience or ads, something like experience. I think there was a joke that it became alphabet core experience or alphabet, component experience, and now it's just one of those acronyms that's there because it's an acronym.
So, and it's actually used beyond ads. It's used. I think ads is the only thing that publicly kind of acknowledged it's written in. Although what's really interesting is there's a thing called Wappalizer, which will go out and can basically figure out what code's being run on different sites and indexes them. And so you can go look at Wappalizer and see other things they're using. Basically, you can do the diff of Dart but not Flutter, and there's still a lot of things at Google that use it.
Yeah, I mean the org I'm in right now, which is a internally facing org but quite big, 300 engineers. At least 100 of those engineers write Dart code, and 100 of those engineers do not touch Flutter. So just to give you an idea of the scale, 100-person Dart organization, and there's at least a handful in that same category.
And then there are other teams that are similar where they're doing something with this ACX framework, and then sharing code and also sharing code with a Flutter client app for native.
Right.
Very cool. Now, speaking of Dart versus Flutter, etc., Flutter 3.3.2 is dropping as we speak. So you heard it here first.
Well, hotfixes.
Yay!
So if you want there's an announcement Flutter Google group which you can get all the information about the hotfixes. It's on there. So, yeah, I'm sure.
All right.
Go find that. Right,
one more from Joel.
Joel had a bunch of good
Joel's got plenty, but this is kind of the last one I believe in this vein. History lessons. Keven, you look like you're going to have so much fun with this.
No.
Do just read the question out loud. Sorry.
All right. I've always had my own interpretation of the whole history of Angular Dart to Angular 2 in Dart to Angular 2 in TypeScript to Angular 2 in Dart being discontinued.
Sure. So there was Angular Dart to start with, and then TypeScript came out. And it's a great way to do JavaScript. And the thing that you have to give props to, right? TS, actually there's I was trying not to get too much into a tangent, but it's really interesting. TS and Dart both target JavaScript, and that's a great thing. But the way you go about it means different things. So TypeScript was meant, and the TypeScript language is designed to have as deep of integration with JavaScript as possible. And so you have union types, all these, you try to represent every possible convention that a JS library could do just for completeness, and so you have good interop, right? So that means TypeScript is not sound, and that's good. It kind of has to be because it targets JavaScript in a very deep way.
Yeah, you can't do sound with JavaScript because of the prototype nature.
Just like Kotlin has unsound bits that map to how Java does things, right? You can't layer it on. We took that burden of trying to do soundness, for instance, and the way we do null safety is sound. And then again, I'm trying to present my project in a good light, but that means trade-offs in terms of interop. So there's a lot of people who are we like this Angular thing. It'd be great if we could use TypeScript so we can interop with all the other JS stuff in the world. So Angular 2 started out. Remember these? Oh my gosh, Matan, these days are insane. They did their own weird language. It's their own language, right? And then they transpiled it to TypeScript and then to Dart.
Yeah, but folks don't remember, but TypeScript was not very popular. It didn't support things like annotations. It still doesn't. You have to add some crazy 15 option experimental thing to actually enable it, right? And so the Angular team, which I admit is very clever, right? They wrote a transpiler that had a annotation-based version of JavaScript with different semantics than JavaScript, TypeScript, or Dart. It was a fourth language. And that fourth language knew how to transpile to JavaScript, to TypeScript, or to Dart. And it kind of worked as long as you didn't look too hard. And
I mean, it sounds crazy to do something like that to a lot of developers, right? But it's not actually that crazy when it comes down to, like, if you can use something like, oh my, the brain literally just escaped me. The compiler engine. You can pop different
LLVM?
LLVM, yeah. So if you can use, like, if you could take advantage of LLVM to do like heavy lifting.
Nope, it was all handwritten.
All right, well, you know,
I remember trying to hack the compiler.
It was handwritten, and I have to admit that the folks.
This sounds crazy.
The folks that worked on the compiler, like, you know, self-admittedly did not have a compiler background. So not only was it a compiler doing really experimental things, it was written probably in a very experimental manner.
And so that
the last time I heard people talking about LLVM and Dart, though, is when there was an argument about whether or not there was a Dart VM.
Yes. Well, and let's not get into that tangent too much, because to finish the question, so that existed for a while, and then it was very clear it was untenable, and so then it sounds like Bitcoin almost or whatever. Then like the great fork happened, and so like this is insane. We will fork, and so the Dart code will continue on being Dart code, and the TS code will live by itself. And so then you had Angular TS and Angular Dart as two separate things that slowly diverged. Which was crazy because people were like, you know, this should be like this or whatever else. And like, we have the same history. It's like, you know, it's like it's like British English and American English. Like, you know.
One thing to understand, and I think the last thing I'll leave it at, is internally we have a monorepo. We're very famous for that. We also have one other thing that's a little bit less known. We have something called the single version policy for third-party dependencies. So you cannot go to NPM and find your favorite. You can't find your favorite package on NPM and bring it into Google and use it in your production app. You absolutely cannot do that. So once you take away the ability to just use any arbitrary library at any version you want, conceptually the idea of having a JavaScript versus Angular, like using it for interop with all of your existing JavaScript code, that only really matters if your team has JavaScript code, right? You're not going to be bringing in all of these third-party libraries and using them anyway. So really, then you're just picking the language that you'd like to work with. Some teams prefer the looser semantics of JavaScript and TypeScript. Some teams prefer the sounder semantics of Dart. Some teams just use what they use for reasons that no one knows anymore, but it works for them. And that's why the actual fork internally was actually not that big of a deal. Like, there are teams that use Angular TypeScript and Angular Dart that work together. My org actually has teams that have both technologies, and everything is fine.
There is actually a project. I don't know if you guys have actually heard of Jasper. Have you guys heard of this project, Jasper? It's nothing to do.
It's a web framework in Dart, right?
Yeah. So I found it quite interesting because what Jasper. I wonder if I can bring it up on stream. I don't want to distract from the questions. We'll get back to the questions, but but Jasper is basically this notion of the same sort of principles of Flutter UI system, but using components, and each thing represents an abstraction over the DOM. So basically, you're kind of falling back to that kind of Angular kind of approach. I mean, it's a completely different approach, but that kind of, you can take your experience from Flutter and bring it to web, but have a truly web output, not a Flutter renders canvas output. Right?
And we talked a little bit about that, like in terms of SEO and other things. The problem is, again, my ancient history, I worked at Microsoft on WPF, XAML, all that stuff. And people, and people talk about button, and like, oh, like they try to build a UI framework, and like, we're XAML, we have a button tag. I'm like, it's not just about having the button tag in XML. It's like, what's the implementation of that? Does it have all the same properties? Does it render the same? Does it have the same styling attributes and margins and padding and everything? Like, it really has to be consistent. So you could imagine a world where like a naive Flutter block of code like maps to some HTML thing. But if you're not using the same rendering model, you fall off cliffs so quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still pondering these things, and who knows? Like,
I have to say, I like what they've been doing. I like the idea of just having a separate like sub system or sub package that just does that. You know what I mean? That I mean, it's fine. It sits as an external package. I think Kev's frozen. Oh no, yeah, I thought Kev froze there for a second. No, but I like the idea of having this separate package that you could still include in your project. And if you build it with one, you get one output, build it with another. And you have to obviously identify that they're different, fundamentally different, but they can both share the same common Dart code, which also kind of, if you keep your business logic Dart only and not related to Flutter, then that kind of gives you that separation.
Yeah, like, I mean, we'll see where things go. That's a whole other bag of worms. We're very focused on the app experience model and just making sure that's screamingly fast. And there's some really cool internal stuff I can't talk about. Like, there's more awesome Flutter web stuff coming. You'll see, like, oh, clearly, like, this is how the model is. And I don't care about blog.google. That can stay DOM, HTML, CSS forever.
Actually, if you look at the trends right now, frameworks are moving away from client-side rendering in general for these kind of content-heavy sites. So the idea that like Flutter or any app framework will be a good framework for static websites, people are saying React's not a good set for static websites anymore, right? So the idea that Flutter is going to be better than React or Angular for websites, it could happen, but like, let me buy that bridge from you. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the thing is, like, could we have predicted where Flutter is now? No. I mean, I don't think like anyone saw that coming. I mean, it filled a hole, but it's not until like suddenly all the developers went and tried it and went, oh no, this is the thing I wanted. Then it kind of exploded, right? So it's kind of just sort of rolling on. Anyway, right, I guess back to some questions. So Scott,
all right. One other one, real quick though. Something I've been waiting to get in here. I think we need to have a contest. Okay, and we need to have people make up graphics and use the hashtag #TheGreatFork. Make up a graphic, and whichever one gets the most likes on Twitter, we're going to feature it next week. So all of you who are good with design and graphics, go ahead and get to work on the Great Fork.
Or just put the Great Fork in Stable Diffusion and see what it creates for you.
All right.
Yeah, well, like Dali or something. Yeah.
We've
just make sure you include Humpday Q&A hashtag.
That one too.
Right, go on. Next question.
We're going to actually, for those of you who have asked questions, I'm going to focus on the ones that are Dart centric because these gentlemen only have a little bit more time. So, see if we can keep it moving here. Any blog or open source project for a Dart API server?
Not that I know of. Oh gosh.
I mean, I'm sorry. Hey, open source project. Don't you own an open source project that's for Dart APIs like Shelf?
Oh yeah, I'm wondering. My guess is this is for like I want to RPC like an RPC endpoint.
Yeah.
Okay. I know. Oh, gosh, I had conversations. There have been people playing with Open API. So I would look in pub.dev for Open API. I don't know what's there, but I think people had played with it. And I know there are people who have had some success with gRPC as well. Frankly, when I'm doing the few little things I've played with where I've had a backend, I just use Shelf Router and to structure out my thing.
There's also there's an open source fork of now the defunct Aqueduct. There's now the Conduit, which is still not completely typed because of the way that Aqueduct originally works. It's not ever going to be, if you want to maintain backwards compatibility, it's just not going to work with being completely compiled. I think it is. It might work through the VM. I can't remember. There's some technical difficulties there. But that's also a good pickup point because that does have like a whole framework that you can sort of depend on to kind
Aqueduct.
Yeah. And so not Aqueduct. It's called the Conduit. The Conduit is a fork and it's still being maintained. But it now has strong types. It has all this kind of stuff. It's great, but I don't think it's going to be a while until it reaches full maturity in terms of where like other frameworks are. I think there's also just to mention this for everyone else. There's serverpod.dev, which is another open source server-side framework. There's also Dart Frog from VGV. That's another one, and there's a few more that are coming out soon as well. So keep your eyes open. The Dart in the server side seems to be exploding. So yeah, and just use Shelf. like shelf and just type shelf into pub. There's a ton of packages that people have made around shelf, not just the official shelf and shelf static and things like that. There's a bunch of them around. So, yeah.
And I know I talked to Frog folks. They have their very kind of internal good reasons for not being exactly shelf compatible. And we need the view feature, which is another language feature that I think is further off discussed, and that would make them happy. And then, but they do have good interop, so they can swap between mount a Frog thing in shelf and mount the shelf thing in Frog. So, yeah. Dart for backend is the question.
Is that a question?
The answer is yes. Yes, you can use Dart for backend.
That's what we're just talking about, right?
Yeah. I mean, my favorite example is pub.dev is hundreds of thousands. I don't know if there are millions of requests a day, but like it's bananas, and it's still App Engine for historical reasons. It could, with some munging, it should just be Cloud Run. So don't copy the code there exactly, because we don't really recommend App Engine anymore. There's a package, but we say just use Shelf on Cloud Run.
To be honest, it wouldn't take much to remove the App Engine YAML file, which does the custom deployment code base, whatever it is, and just to use a Docker file and just spin it. Really?
There are some weird.
I know what you're talking about. The
environment variables. There's
App Engine specifics.
Yeah, like the way logging is handled. There's a bunch of weird stuff there. Like, unfortunately.
But generally speaking, I've done this before. There's plenty. It's so easy to run up a shelf server on API on Cloud Run. It's just super simple. There's great examples out there.
So the example I point people to, if there's a SDK repo, so under Dartlang, GitHub.org, there's a samples repository, and under there's server, and there's a shelf example, and there's a Docker image in there, and that will just deploy. And in fact, if you look at my Twitter history a while back, I have it's 0 to Cloud Run. I say under 2 minutes. I should have said 90 seconds. That sounds better. But it was seriously like deploy in 90 seconds. It's pretty amazing.
Right. So you said it was there's a Dartlang samples.
Oh, you're gonna be a good person and help people.
Well, I was going to bring it up on the screen, but I can't even find it.
That's great. So. Here. I'll chat it to you.
Got it. Yeah. Fire it over. We'll get that up on the screen. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. While y'all are working on that, perhaps we can move to the next one here, since we have about, I don't know, will you guys have a hard stop in 10 minutes?
I'm good at probably till 10:30.
Yeah, 10:30 is fine.
Okay, cool. No, we've got a little ways then.
Just got to run to your next meeting.
Okay. This is kind of like the old school radio stations going, yeep up.
Yeah.
Everybody's too young to remember that,
I've known it.
It's the end of the song and nobody puts on another song.
What a question, Scott. My goodness. The people they put.
Go on.
I thought you were looking for something. That's why I was waiting.
Okay, here, wait. I was just gonna hear. So as an example.
I popped the link in the chat for anyone that wanted the server example.
Okay, let me share. Can I share a window?
Sure.
Yeah.
Wait, if I click share screen, it's gonna.
That's it.
You can press share screen, and then you can select window or tab.
That's what I want. Here you go. Oh. So this is the Dart SDK repo, and this is SourceTree is a good Git client if you want. So this is like if you just search for Dart to WASM in SDK, you can see all the amazing work that ASCII and Josh are doing to support Dart to WASM.
Wow. So
actually, starting here you go. There's the first commit, October 2020, and then we took a little bit of a break, and there was one commit in 2021. But since the start of this year, been cranking really hard.
So, is there a roadmap for this? Because that's the next question.
Is there a roadmap?
In roadmap. Oh, in the roadmap.
So we have some milestones that we're cranking on, and we're feeling good about them. And I don't have anything to share today.
Yeah. It's open source. Go.
Wait,
figure out what you figure out.
Tell us the super secret stuff before we came on the camera. You left something out.
So it's going really well. We have folks on the Flutter side also doing really well, and I'm going to stay vague there.
One thing I'll mention, and I don't work on the Dart project, so I can say whatever I want, right? There are good software engineering reasons to focus on one thing at a time. This is not specific to WebAssembly, Dart, or whatever else. So just know that the internal milestones for what the Dart to WASM team is focusing on may or may not be something that's useful for you, right? When you think about, you're trying to develop a brand new compiler backend and all these things, like there's things you care about, like how are we going to deal with garbage collection? It's a brand new spec on WebAssembly. How are we going to interop with existing Dart code, if at all? Are we going to be able to interact with JavaScript? Like, how is the memory management across these layers working? These are all things you're going to assume just work when you use the compiler for the first time, but it's a lot of work on the internal side. So when I mean there, I'm sure there is a roadmap. I'm sure there is milestones, but it's not milestones or roadmap of a thing that, like, okay, as a user, this is now useful to you.
Yeah. It's going to be now.
You might be surprised. You might. Well, I don't. Yeah.
No promises, right?
No promises. It's an interesting slog. So like I think I pointed out in a tweet a while ago, you need 3 flags for our own internal hacking. You need 3 flags because you need WASM garbage collection, you need string ref, and you need stacks. There's a stack swapping or just stack proposal. Like you need 3 separate flags to like get it all working. We're like right on the bleeding edge. Like I was having conversations with the Chrome team yesterday around how the standards are going, because it's like a lot of these are like phase 3 of 5 on the standards track, and so part of being to phase 4, phase 5 is you first need a working implementation. So we're working on working implementations, and so we are collaborating closely with them. Askey is doing a great job and answering and asking questions on the repos. Like if you go look at the WASM GC thing, there's discussions about how a bunch of stuff works. It's a very cool, tight loop. Yeah.
I suppose we've seen this already with like EM Scripton and what that outputs in terms of like doing like you've seen like the DOS box in the browser and all these kind of like really sort of heavy applications in the browser and how well they perform. And I think it's the drive from my feeling, from what I get from hearing people, is that the drive for WASM from the community is more about trying to get better performance out of the browser, right? Like trying to eke out that performance where the interpretation of the JavaScript and the loading of the JavaScript and all this kind of just gets in the way now, right? Where WASM it'll still run the code and it's still inside the isolated inside the environment. It's just what you do.
A great example here is numbers, right? Like if you want to do integer, there was this joke going around the way we detect web.
I know 0 equals 0.0.
Yeah, no, it's 1 equals 1.0. I mean, that's right. Because I don't think zero.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
but strictly speaking, it's identity semantics, right? It's not equality semantics. Like, is 1 interned at the same thing as 1.0?
I'm so glad we don't have triple equals as like a thing.
We have identical, which is kind of the same. So like JS engines, they have crazy optimizations around if they know it's a number, it'll be encoded a certain way, and if it's an integer versus a double, and so like you can get 64-bit ints equivalent in WASM. There's a whole bunch of things that just get way tighter because the semantics are much more locked down on the WASM side. So we are optimistic that we will get faster time to first frame and faster overall interactive performance. We are optimistic. We're still waiting you need to benchmark these things. We're not naive to say like throw everything. We're spending a lot of time on it.
It's worth mentioning, Simon. Like with the example you gave with DOSBox and Mscripton, that's C++. That's C.
I know,
right? So you're doing manual memory management. Dart's performance is going to be Dart performance is going to be closer to a memory managed language that's higher level. It's actually possible that the peak performance of JavaScript VMs will beat WASM, right? Because JavaScript has a compiler, it can actually generate some decent code in the backend. But like as you mentioned, Keven, like time to first frame, loading the code for the first time, caching them, working with things that are closer to the hardware.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Like they have a JIT compiler in WASM too, and that can optimize as it's running too. Like
hot path detection and all the fun stuff.
Yeah. Like that's the nice thing about having an intermediate language, right?
Right.
Is that you have those options, and the folks on the VM side in Chrome, like and V8 are crazy smart. And so they're always tweaking between, do you do a really fast initial compile? Do you do inference? Do you do incremental compile? And they'll just,
It reminds me of the days when I was using C, when I'm like, oh, I need to get this extra 2 milliseconds, just out of stupidity, I don't know. But I want to get this extra 2 milliseconds out of this loop, so I'm going to unroll the loop manually because that's bad because the compiler just doesn't do it right. Or some other crazy thing.
The compiler does it all. Yeah, it's pretty bananas. And there's other things too. Like right now we're doing JavaScript to WASM because we're talking to the Canvas kit backend, which is Skia. And we're still working on this, but and then again, even the WASM core standard stuff is evolving, so that we think we'll be able to bind our WASM module directly to Skia. And so, as far as the runtime is concerned, you have one blob of WASM code that's talking to itself directly. There's no thunking between JavaScript and WASM.
It should be closer to dynamic linking in C versus what you're doing right now.
With the benefit of, since it's all in a runtime, hopefully you actually get you'd actually, if you have an optimizing compiler, you'd actually optimize across the whole span. There's a bunch.
I believe that's actually how. So this is going to take you back a while, but I believe that's how Rive is doing its thing on Android, right? So they have a dependence on Skia, but rather than shipping Skia in Rive, you can, in your animation, their sort of runtime for Android, they can just essentially map directly in the NDK directly map to the Skia functionality that exists on the platform, right? So
I've done that specific example, but there's super exciting stuff. And generally, I tell people the two things I'm excited about in the world right now in tech, RISC-V and WASM. There's so much going on.
RISC-V.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And
we have great support for RISC-V is actually in beta now in Dart too. So I've not seen it with my own eyes running, but I'm curious to play with it.
I've got my eyes on a few embedded platforms that are running RISC-V to try Dart on. That's my
I want to play that too. Anyway, questions.
Anyway, let's move on. Questions. Yeah, more questions.
What are questions? We don't have no questions.
All right.
This is framed in a Flutter as a Flutter question, but it's really a Dart question. And I'm looking at this thinking that the problem might not be what they think it is. But why can't I put a nullable parameter in a private class? And then they give an example. And I'm looking at the way those parameters are lined up. And I have questions.
Wait, hang on. Final string, nullable this. That's valid.
I mean, text should be lowercase in the constructor, and
sure. I think that's just because of the dot, it did an auto thing on their phone.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's
private class. Yeah, no, I think that the thing here is no. I tell you what it is. I tell you what this is. This might be doing the. I have an idea. It's a private class, which means it's doing the overall analysis and saying it's not being referenced. You can't make it final or something. Some maybe weird thing like that. So. If you use the class, maybe actually have an implementation of the class in the same file or same part or whatever. That might work. I don't see any problem with that.
Everything there. If he's getting a warning or a hint, I can imagine him getting a hint if he's not instantiating this yet. Because if you have a private class and you never instantiate it, you'll get a warning or a hint saying, "Hey, you have a class here that's never instantiated." But that code looks totally fine.
I'm not aware of anything with nullability in private that should matter.
Yeah, I would tell people right now, put it on Dartpad and get a squiggle on Dartpad and send us the link and see if it doesn't work.
I tell you the other thing to mention is that check your version of Dart in your pubspec YAML file. You might have an outdated version of Dart in your command, and when you did Dart create or something like that, it's creating with an older version of Dart that doesn't support nullable, so it's giving you some weird error. So if you use the latest, check your version in pubspec.
Make sure the lower bound on your environment constraint is at least 212.
Yeah, at least 212. And
hit me up on Twitter. Just tweet at me, and I can help you walk through it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Moving on. Any way to get over the Dart HTML issue when you're trying to cross compile?
Yes.
No.
Well.
Okay, wait. The Flutter Whisperer says yes, and the guy who actually works at Google and is a project manager.
Well, I should be more clear. So you can do conditional imports, but if you want to, you can't reference the types in both places. You can do conditional imports in one library and have that library conditionally import something that uses Dart HTML and something that uses Dart IO. We need to do a better job of documenting that, but you can do conditional import. But right now, Dart HTML is all of our runtimes assume that stuff is targeted at the JS compiler, and it'll blow up. The really weird thing is you can have transitive imports to Dart.io in a web app, and we won't blow up at compile time. We'll just blow up at runtime. And that's a whole bunch of
even that's not totally true, right? Because DTC will blow up, but Dart.js won't. Like, there's inconsistencies everywhere. So,
and part of that was like migrating Flutter and doing Flutter web, and there's still Dart.io bits littered around the Flutter framework, and we just wanted to get compile. So we're like, just no op it. It's really weird.
So my point was, like, it depends on what he means by get over, right? So if he means get over as in like just to make it compile, then yeah, you can do conditional imports. But obviously, there's no getting over the fact that if you need to use something, you need to use it, right?
Yeah, the Dart VM.
The Dart VM does not have an anchor element. No matter what you do, you will not be able to create one, and that will never happen.
Right. I want to mention that's the same thing here for any of these web packages down here that you see. So so this on api.dart.dev, .html, IndexedDB, JS, SVG, all of this is all web specific and won't exist in your app. There is, however, a really good package called Universal HTML. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. He says it's not been up there. But I think this is the one.
The reason that it's unknown platform is because the package site has trouble interpreting packages that do this, that support both.
So yeah, but basically the idea is that you depend on their types, and their types under the hood will reference either or, and they do conditional imports as well. So you can kind of get away with it, and this kind of solves the problem. I won't go into the details, but in some situations, Universal HTML will solve what you're.
There's also package HTML, which is not anything to do with DOM, so that won't let you manipulate DOM in the browser, but you can. It's an object model for DOM elements.
It's hard to answer the question without knowing the intent, right? Because like maybe you're not using the class at all, and you just want it to go away. If that's the case, configurable imports works well.
I have already big into this. We're going so much into detail here, and I can tell you now, he just wants this really small answer of what's on the top.
So let me get this right, okay? Let me get this straight. This guy said yes. This guy said no. This guy said maybe.
There you go. There's your answer.
There you go.
Right.
It's complicated. It's a nuance. Yep.
Everything in programming is nuanced, I think. Unless it's a true or false answer. This is a completely brilliant answer. It's like everything's nuanced.
Yeah.
Go on.
All right. There are many companies using Go for the back end with Flutter. The question is, how does Go compare with Dart for this?
So Go is actually, it's really funny. Well, I think I can talk about this a little bit. I guess I'll be vague, but like there's a bunch of random teams at Google supporting internal and external and third party, whatever else. We are now more tightly aligned with Go than we ever have been, which is super exciting. And I won't give all the exact details, but like we're now in a situation where hopefully we'll be able to collaborate them, because we do surveys and we ask users what they want to do, and we do user research. And so we're actually now in a spot where we can share more of that stuff, which I think will just be great for the whole world. Because if you just go out and if you're asking users how they use software and what they're doing, like it's good to share resources. So we're excited to be able to be closer to the Go team. We're also hyper aware that like they have a very different user base. Like, they're like the whole, cloud native Kubernetes, like that's all Go, and God bless them. And Dart is not well set. Like that stuff Dart was never designed to do. So go for it. On the back end, I think it's an interesting question. Go is way more mature than we are. Their package ecosystem, like there are people there like have been doing server apps forever, right? So I think the one difference, and this is actually how we're pitching Dart on the back end, which is like, if you want to do simple services, if you want to glue services together in the back end to support a Dart front end, we think that's a slam dunk, because you can share your business
what you use
model.
TypeScript for. Yeah,
What's that?
Or Javas. Like currently use of TypeScript and JavaScript in the back end is very much like cloud functions that glue things together, right?
Yeah, and especially if you want to share code, because then you can stay in the same experience. Like if you want to do crazy high performance, deep framework, deep server stuff, where you're actually doing huge computations and stuff, then like Go and Rust and C++ are probably better solutions there. If you're gluing services together in the back end, where the latency of just calling the service is the dominating factor and not like the computation locally, then Dart is a great solution there too. So, we'd love more people to use Dart, but I'm not naive enough to say we solve everyone's problems, or like that, Go has a very deep bench in terms of its offerings for backend.
Its robust standard library and concurrency model is just brilliant, and I think it really it's designed for that environment. So makes sense.
Yeah, like we don't have a model that's similar to Go routines and that kind of stuff. And the reason is we're very paranoid about you don't have to think about thread contention at all in Dart. Like it's all message passing, and then we leave performance on the table because we're not as tight and tiny as like a Go routine model. So it's trade-offs.
Alrighty. Any insights if Dart will be supported as a native language, so without a custom runtime in AWS Lambda?
I don't know. There's a gentleman, and of course his name and everything I lose track of. But it's a good reminder for Google Cloud folks, right? Because Amazon I think has someone full time on AWS that's focused on Flutter. So there's a gentleman, and I'm sure someone in the chat will know the person and make a reference to him, and we should just ask him. He would know. I for some reason Amazon doesn't tell me about their internal plans. I don't know why.
It's not Salih, right?
I honestly don't remember. I have to look at his.
So one of the Flutter GDEs, Salih, who's in the community, has actually just recently moved to being a Google developer, a developer advocate for AWS and what's the
Amplify.
That's it. Yeah, and so he could run up that question internally, or at least put into it. But who knows?
All right. Somebody's asking for secrets. What can I use in Dart that you're excited about releasing in the future? Well, if it's not released yet.
So, that's the great, honestly. Well, and actually, let me get meta a little bit, because I know we have folks that are learning coding in Dart, like learning to read source code, learning to go through diffs, and is so helpful. Like, you don't understand how much you're picking up. And so, I probably do it more than I should, but I have the Dart SDK. I rarely build. Occasionally, I'll build the Dart SDK locally, if I want to try out something that's happening. But every day, once or twice a day, I just sync the Dart SDK and and I just step through what's happened today, and I just kind of scan through and I look. Sometimes it's Ryan working on optimizing SIMD in RISC-V, and I just look at the C++ and remember how dumb I am. Because it's just mind blowing, and you should too. It's interesting just to see how stuff's structured.
Literally, there's me and Scott, and I remember doing exactly that same thing with the Flutter repo in the early days, because there was a simple amount of stuff happening, you could follow it, and it was just this is happening during alpha, this is the next thing that's been worked on. Oh, I want to there's the PR number for that, I'll go, or the issue ticket, I'll go comment, or you had a very direct interaction.
Yeah, and it's
a small divergence here.
But if you ever want to send a PR to any repo in the universe, especially things we maintain, anything, and Matan, jump in here if you have thoughts here. You want to go read at least. It's how many books would you read before you write a book? So how many PRs should you read before you submit a PR? So go look at commits. How are they structured? Every change to the Flutter SDK has tests and tests every functionality. Maybe I should make sure I write tests. You just see people change functionality or add functionality, they update the change log. Maybe I should make sure that if I'm adding functionality, I update the change log. And so to get back to the original question, so it's good to just have a Git GUI. I highly recommend getting a GUI that lets you look through history. But if you're curious what's happening in Dart, go sync the repo. You'll see before other people. You can go see what's happening with records. And if you want to understand what's happening with records, look at the tests they're adding to support the records feature, and you will understand how records are working. I actually talked Bob. I was so lucky because Bob and the other thing to look at too for Dart is you go dartlang/language. That's our language repository, and look at the PRs there. Look at the commits there. You can see what everyone is working on. And so
just can I say, as someone who was very frustrated this repo didn't exist 5 years ago, how great it is to have what it is today. There was something called Dart enhancement proposals before that was basically abandonware. And there was just it was abandonware. You could people would post stuff there, but there was no follow-up, there was no organization. It was a very disconnected process from but now the fact that you can go to this repo and see what is the language team working on, and what did they care about, and what are they thinking about, and you don't have to be a product manager at Google to go to this thing. You can just go to this link.
My humble request there, if you are in the language repo, use reactions. Use your thumbs up, thumbs down on the top level issues. Please use that. Please, please, please avoid Me Too comments. Like, don't add noise there, and think very hard. Like, if you have worked in languages or you have experience with something and there's a nuance to the grammar, like, again, spend 100 times more consuming than you do contributing. Like, really read the spec through carefully before you start adding real comments there, because we are trying very hard to be open and transparent with everything. But if everyone in our community suddenly wants to be armchair language designer without context and start adding 3 comments a day, it becomes untenable. So I ask people to be responsible and careful there. We want your feedback, we want your thoughts, but please be your best self in those contexts. And that really encourages us to continue being open. Joel asked another really good question recently about Build Runner at 10:10.
Yeah, that was actually going to be the one after the next one. But I mean, if you want to take that one right now.
Okay.
Sure.
Great question. So again, if you look at the language feature stuff, the macros work. We've done a lot of cool work with macros, and we kind of put it on pause because we know that it's a longer lead time and there's some other investigations to do internally. But the long-term plan there, Joel, is what a lot of what Build Runner does now would probably be subsumed by the macro work. But again, we're not talking about timelines or anything with macros. But there still might be a place for things like Build Runner when you're dealing with stuff that isn't Dart code. But we're hoping a lot of like source gen and these other things that, and JSON serializable and built value and a bunch of these other things, hopefully could all be taken care of by the macro work. But that's, stick with Build Runner for now. There was a great talk, I think, at Vikings about using Build Runner. That's still gonna be the story for a while there. Don't drop that stuff now thinking macros is around the corner, because it's a ways out.
All right. I hope this doesn't mean what I think it means, because immutability is good, strong typing is good, and manipulating types. Any plans to implement type manipulation operators like TypeScript has?
I don't know what those are.
I can step in there a little bit because I dabble. Okay, so TypeScript
the hair, you can tell he's on the
yeah. So TypeScript types are completely erased at runtime, even more so than Java, right? So when you have a TypeScript type, it means something to the TypeScript compiler. It means absolutely nothing to the runtime of your application. Absolutely nothing. That's why you can do as int as string or as number as string, and your code will work until it doesn't. You can do that. You cannot do that in Dart. If you try casting a string to an int, it is now impossible. Okay, so once you
you can do anything as bool, I'm guessing, in TypeScript, and it'll just work.
Oh, for sure, 100%. And the worst part is it will work until it doesn't too, right? So like, for example, let's pick on pick. Maybe I can share my screen so people can see what I'm talking about. Share screen. Thank you for these screen sharing tips.
No, Matan, from experience, when you stop screen sharing, make sure you don't click Leave Studio.
Okay. yeah.
Okay, so people that don't know, this is the pick utility type. It lets you basically pass another type to do. This is such a cool little preview, by the way. This is way better than Dartpad, Kevin. Just saying, we have to respect our partners over here, the TypeScript team, for this awesome preview. So basically, you could say, I want to create a subtype of to do, and only copy the I guess just title or title or completed. Okay, this is cool. This lets you kind of create. This is almost like a macro type. You can think about a little bit of the original to do.
Mm-hmm.
The reason this would never, ever, ever, ever work in Dart is because basically what you would have to do, Kevin, remind me if I'm wrong, is like this would have to be some sort of macro or type generator. There's no way to create something like a utility type in Dart, because you'd actually have to encode that type at runtime in the runtime of the program, so you can do things like casts. So even if the Dart team added something like this, I don't want to think about the effects on like the runtime performance or compilation speed, A. and B, I don't think it would do what you think it would do. Sorry, Kevin, I was going to interrupt you.
No. Like, so look at the records proposal. You can now define types, record types inline. So I can define a function type inline. I don't have to do a type def. Yeah. I could have, like, if you could have a name split. Bob just gave me this example last night. You could do name split.
You brought up a good point.
A tuple that is string first name, comma, string last name.
You brought up a good point. Like, classes in Dart are what's called nominal typing. You're not intended to be able to cut and dice them like you just saw. Records are going to be, and structs, or whatever they're going to be called, are going to be structurally typed, like TypeScript objects. So yeah, records are going to have a lot more flexibility to be able to do this kind of stuff because they are meant specifically to do this.
And what's interesting, Bob just had and so in the record world, if I define a record that is first name, last name, string, and 15 other packages in my app all define that same record just locally, right? It's exactly like a type def or a function definition. Those are all compatible. Those all will be compatible.
Yeah.
You'll be able to use those types. There's a bunch of really, I don't know. Wait,
if anyone's interested, this is the overall ticket, right?
This one. Look at, actually, that's a great example. If you're in the language repo right now, scroll to the top. Yeah. I love, Simon, are you driving?
Yeah.
I remember the last time we did this, it was such a hot mess. Hit language.
Yeah, go for it.
I love driving his mouse. Then click commits.
Commits, yeah.
And then see what he is explicit by. Yeah. Okay, so I would look at anything records. So click on just fixed version number just to see the file that he's editing. Because I forget what file. Just click on that. One of those. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So records feature specification. That is the file. So get out of here now. Just see. So working. Go now. Get out of here because you're now in a. I'm sure you're in a.
Here we go. And now we're in master. There you go.
Perfect. Yeah. So if people are curious, this is where to go look. And Bob just updated it
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh no, it's more recent. Are you sure? Are you on master? Or are you on a Shaw?
I'm definitely on master.
Okay.
This is just the specification, Kevin. This is not the code.
Oh, I know, but no, I swear he's updated it more recently than.
It might be on a separate branch, who knows? But yeah, so yeah, this gives you the examples of what's been aimed for, right?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like, so the example Bob gave, which I love, was that we would not have a map entry class in the SDK if we had records. We would just use records for that. And then records to get really, because then you can use records to deconstruct instances of things. You can use records to return values.
I'm just looking forward to getting rid of this map literals used everywhere because the syntax is cute. Like if that gets rid of that, I'm happy.
Well, this is the thing, right? So I mentioned this before, but returning to, let's say you want to have a function that returns multiple return values, you're limited to just returning an object that has two fields, or an array, even worse,
you mean a map, right? Like return a map or return a list, yeah.
Yeah, and then or return a map. But the problem here is that
create a new type. Yeah.
The problem is that those types are not meant for records, right? Like they are very. What's the word?
Well, no, they're not sound. They're not. You have to either string index to it and then do a bang operator on the indexer because it might be null, or you're indexing into the array and then you have to cast the value to the type you want. Because if I want to return a Boolean and a string,
exactly. Yeah.
So like
they're fundamentally not the same thing, and I think people are just using these because that's the thing that's available to them. And when the language
class is so much work, yeah.
And I think there is actually. I think it might be Dart collection, or it might be just be something else. But there's actually a tuple 1, tuple 2, tuple 3 types. And one of these
it's actually packaged. It's packaged tuple.
Oh, there you go. That's what I'm thinking of then. And then that you can kind of give generic types to, and then kind of have some sort of clarity. But
it goes up to 7, I believe.
So what's really interesting, and I thought this might be a little bit inside baseball, but just as an interesting discussion, because I talked to Bob about this last night. So wait, is it identity? Not what's equals? What's super equals? It's called, is it identity?
Identical.
Identical.
Yeah.
Identical is not guaranteed to work, even if two tuples, even two records are completely identical. It might work, but it might not, and then you should use normal equals. And the reason here is because we want to give runtimes the ability to completely optimize away the record. So if I have a private function somewhere that's not overridden, imagine a static function, right, or top-level function that takes in a record of ABC, string, or whatever. Runtimes are completely able to say, oh, I'm going to compile it down to a function that just takes 3 arguments, ABC, or whatever they want to do. So it's designed to enable hyper optimization.
This is one of the things that I liked about it. Like when I saw, sorry, this kind of covers the point I just made. This is what I really liked about the record thing, is because coming from a C background, having just about to add items on the stack and pick them up on the other side, and the kind of advantages that gives in terms of optimization. You're not allocating objects on the heap. You're not freeing that object. You've not got all this minutia around that. It can be heavily optimized, and it would really make a difference to a lot of the language structure. Just be able they're not an object per se.
TypeScript and JavaScript are amazing, and Kotlin and Java are amazing, but and we are behind the 8 ball. We're behind a little bit because we're not deep in the Java ecosystem. We're not deep in the JavaScript ecosystem in terms of we're actually doing a lot of great work to make interop better there, but they have huge ecosystems, right? We're not part of that. But the benefit we get is we can design language features like this and optimize it soup to nuts, which we're really excited about.
Very cool. All right. Last one I can see about Dart so far, and that's kind of interesting. Can you give me insane projects I can do with Dart? It depends on how you define insane. I've got a really tight deadline. If you're willing to work for free, send me a message.
Fractals, just for fractal stuff.
One thing I would love more people to play with. So go look at the Dart changelog and search for the word isolate. And Martin Kusterman, brilliant guy on the VM team, and some other folks. Who was the main lead. I don't want to say it's just one person, but they did a bunch of work to hyper optimize isolates. And I have yet to see people really go crazy trying to parallelize out computation stuff with isolates. I would love to see.
You should mention that.
You need to go watch Thomas's talk at Flutter Vikings.
I haven't
pull
seen
it up right now.
So that's the one. So Thomas actually did fractal. Did fractal generation using many isolates basically. It's really interesting.
I would love to see then go spin up the 120 core VM for 30 minutes and see how fast you can do stuff like that. In terms of just pure Dart, I think that's where things get really fun. And the other fun thing, and I think someone else was asking questions about talking to native code. They're asking, how do I get my MAC address and other stuff? So my boss, the director of product management for Dart and Flutter, has this library called Win32, and he auto-generates all these Win32 APIs. Yes, that one. And he did all the work to bind to all those native APIs. So that's another interesting place. If you look at our changelog in Dart 2.18, we've done a bunch more work around FFI and interop, and that's the other place to go play.
Interesting.
It's something else, another fun place to play that's also similar. We have package WASM, and that is not for the web. It's funny. It's not for the web. It's for native platforms, probably mostly desktop, where you can take a WASM module and it uses Dart FFI plus the WASM runtime to bind WASM to desktop Dart. And so I'd love to see more examples of people compiling Rust to a WASM module and then binding it to Dart. And I saw other people who did a package recently. Someone was talking about doing Rust Dart bindings. There's a bunch of fun stuff to do in that space. I would say though, if you're I don't know where you are experience-wise as a person in the industry, whatever. Again, always my recommendation to people, especially if you're starting out or relatively new, solve a real problem, and don't try to do something just wow for wow's sake. You will learn more if you're even make a game that's fun to play and I can give this to my niece or my son or whatever, and they can play the game and have fun with it. Try to solve a real problem. I know it's fun to go out there and do something crazy, but you'll hone your skills much more if you solve real problems. It's fun to go solve crazy things too, but
I do think sorry, I just want to quickly cover that. I do think there's an interesting learning out there that I've personally done, which is re-implementation, right? Do something yourself. Maybe it's making media player, maybe it's making this, making it that. It has less. The output of this is just complete throwaway, right? You're never going to make something that's made by a complete big huge team of people that's being maintained, right? But the point is that along the journey to getting from point A to point B, you can learn quite a lot, I think, from just a general learning.
Matan, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm going to share my little side project and exactly what Keven is talking about right now. Let's see, window. So I've been playing around a lot with just using the command line. I know, super exciting. But
it's to make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, can you?
It's going to be bigger in a second, just to make it obvious. One of the nice things about Dart is that you can just get up and running very, very quickly. There's no Gradle. There's no like figuring out your make. You know, we've all been there, right? So I wanted to be able to just kind of hack on really simple projects and like not think too much. So I created a little example. This is Conway's Game of Life. I'm gonna run it in 2 modes, right? So the one mode is just like the standard Game of Life. Not super exciting. You've probably seen this example before. This is like a classical, like your first 2D application. So these are like, it's kind of like cellular autonomous simulator. You can do something like this, even if you're a new developer, in a couple of days, right? Like you can look up how to do this. It's very, very doable. You can do it in Flutter. You can do it in Dart Web. You can do it on the command line. There's no like resource requirements to do this. If you want to get fancy, which is what I've been doing, is like I added a debug option so I can kind of understand why the cells are evolving the way they want. So if I do the debug option, you're going to see a bunch of very scary looking things. All of those numbers are how many neighbors that cell has that's currently alive, and you can kind of see it evolving.
It's Minesweeper on a massive level.
It basically is Minesweeper. But like if you want to talk about like something you can do that doesn't require a lot of background in computer science, but you just want to see something cool, I think this is pretty cool.
And this is great too, because like we give you the one-dimensional data structures, but even reasoning about how do I store 2-dimensional data? Do I do a giant one-dimensional array or do I have a list of lists? If you're starting out, just the exercise of getting this working, you will hone your chops so much. How do I think about like adjacency and the math there, and how do I deal with the edges? Like these things are spectacular because it's visceral. Success is so visceral. You don't have to worry about like making a manager happy. So if you're a beginner, I totally agree. This is great stuff.
I'm going to mention if you're a self-taught programmer, right? Like don't worry about like the terms that we use, like desugaring and like whatever else, right? Like destructuring, whatever. Like all these kind of like concepts we have names for is things that you pick up for like, oh, that's the name for that thing, right? But you've probably done it already, or you've probably implemented like 2-dimensional like structures, and we're going, it's not that difficult, right?
Keven is totally right though. Like pick something that would make you happy if it worked and work on that problem, and then try working on it in multiple different ways. Like what if I did X? What if I did Y? What if I did Z? You'll get a way more out of that than like, how do I use FFI with isolates? If you're obviously very, very new.
Okay, we've got, how you guys doing on time? We've got 2 more potentially here. Look,
yeah, let's see if I can get that, but go ahead.
I've got a question as well, quickly, if I can.
I can do a final question, and then I unfortunately do have to go.
Okay, so what do you want the one about powerful enum types, or do you want one about macros?
Neither.
I feel like we talked about macros quite a bit already.
Yeah.
Let's go for the enums.
So when working with Rust, very powerful enum data type, enums and enums, easy call to strings, serialize. Is it possible Dart can have these?
You want data classes, and I think, well, there's a couple things. So enums. Oh yeah, I'm getting kicked out. Yeah, I can't.
I'll answer the question, Keven, and I'll say anything I want now that you're gone.
Perfect. Great to see you guys. Take care.
Kevin's in a booked room, and someone else needs it right now.
So I was going to say, like quickly, enums do now have members. I can't remember 216 or 215, I think it was. So you can actually add your own custom members and your own parameters to the constructor as long as they're constant. You're fine. So
So enums now in Dart do have fields, right? You can implement fields. You can implement methods on them. That gives you some power. I think what the poster means in terms of Rust is, and by the way, Rust does not have a good serialized from JSON story with enums, right? It's not like that's something it's known for. Is really around pattern matching and being able to constrain your types. Going back to what Keven was talking about with records and pattern matching that Bob on the language team was working on, they're working to enable something like this with records, right? So it's very possible in the near future, using a combination of records and enums and pattern matching, you'll get something very close to what Rust is doing. Yeah.
I've posted the link again to the spec, and go read the spec, and perhaps you'll see there that will solve the problem that you're talking about specifically. It's a shame. It's a shame. I've got one question here. This is actually from an audience member. Does gRPC for web still need a proxy? And if yes, why? It's the same. I know this isn't for anyone here, and there's no one here that can answer this. But I came up with the same problem. Like, I wanted to use gRPC in a project, and we're using gRPC. We do it on the server side. We want to do it on the app, and it all works fine. Then we go, okay, we want our web stuff to use the API, and suddenly you're in this real difficult situation now, because gRPC, you cannot communicate with gRPC server without a web proxy. Just gRPC on web just doesn't work that way, and it's still problematic as far as I'm aware.
And I can give you a 30-second answer to that, and then I do have to go. So gRPC is an amazing technology. It really, really is super great. When you're building a standards-based technology that needs to be rolled out and supported everywhere, you have to make trade-offs. They decided to make trade-offs where gRPC worked great on server-based native stacks without a web story, and then hoped that Chrome would evolve over time to support it, and that bet did not pan out. Right, so it's very possible in the future Chrome and other browsers will add the APIs necessary to gRPC natively. But until then, I would expect you have to use a proxy. It's just a known.
To be honest, with HTTP 2 and 3, like the benefits of gRPC are getting less and less ish.
Right.
It's complicated, but yeah. Right. Well, thank you for coming along the show. I feel like we should have asked more questions, so you're welcome to come back on the show at any time. And
yeah, please let me know when I can be useful. This was fun. Anytime.
Yeah. Cool.
All right,
thanks for coming, and we'll see you.
Bye.
Thanks for coming. All right. And actually, we are pushing over our time. But one of the things that I've noticed is we have really been. When was the last time we answered some beginner questions?
Well, I think we should have a Randall back on the show.
Possibly, yes.
There we go. We have room for you, Randall.
A couple things here.
I've never left, but I'm just behind the scenes.
True. Oh, sorry, just with time.
Oh, this is interesting.
But do you have plans to make widget sizing mechanism to be more explicit? It's hard to know which size it wants. The thing is, I think you have to flip your thinking.
Yeah.
Because the parent is setting the size, unless the one real time that's not happening is when you have to align something in something else. Because if the parent tells it you have to be as big as you can be, then you can't align it left or right because it's already filling all the space.
I think I can empathize with the question here, and I think this will give you a different tack possibly. It's me to remember whether something is going to be as big as it can be or as small as it can be. Because there's so many complex parent-child relationship conditions in that you really do need to be able to read the docs and read the source code to work that out, or just have a ton of experience like Simon seemed.
It might be nice. I think I like I've just come up with an idea here, and this is just me throwing it out there, and that is, I wonder if there's room for an annotation on widgets to explicitly say that they are tight constraint widgets, they're loose constraint widgets, or they're a mix.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's certain widgets that are always going to be trying to fill their parent,
I was thinking about doing an article on that. It's kind of like taking Mark's article a bit further. He's talked about how the constraints work. But yeah, I asked about this maybe 2 years ago, trying to get a list of which widgets are passing tight constraints, loose constraints, or no constraints.
To be honest, it can also depend that like most widgets don't actually touch the constraints at all. They just all sort of flows down the tree. To be honest, I think it's just like read the article. So the do I have it to hand? I thought I did. There is a lovely article. Here we go. I've got it. I'll put the link in the chat. It is now on the screen. Hopefully, in a second. This one here, which is UI layout constraints, and I'll put that link in the chat. This is the article we're talking about by Mark Glassberg originally, and myself as well. And some other people gave some input, and this is basically just taking you through how the constraints go and work. And we always say constraints go down, sizes go up, and the parent sets the position.
And I think the child has no idea if it got locked in the closet.
Yeah, I also think it takes a bit of practice, because it took me a while to learn, and even though it's right there in the docs, that a container goes big unless it holds something, and then it tries to go as small as that is. And so there's really two different biases it has, depending on whether it has a child or not.
Yep.
And that's gets in, I think, to what the original questioner is asking here.
Yeah, and that's another thing too is, I know I wrote an article a long time ago about all the wonderful things a container can do, but as we have all learned and as things have evolved, one thing a container cannot do is be const. And if you learn what the guts of the container are and how it works under the hood, you're really actually better off just assembling those pieces yourself, because all the container is doing is looking at your parameters, deciding which pieces you need, and then putting them together. But the problem is a container can't be const. So you could assemble those pieces yourself and make it const and have better performance. And it's just better code.
Well, let's see how many of these other 19 that we can knock out real quick.
I think we should try and get through these as quickly as possible.
Well, I know, and I'm taking a look here real quick. I'm trying to aim towards ones that are a little bit more for beginners, because we've been doing nosebleed for a while. I want to switch between one container with text in it that's 100 wide, reveal a translation so the two are 50-50 sitting next to each other. Is animated switcher a way forward, or can two animated containers be controlled? Now, here's the thing. You're talking about you're talking about a reveal. If you do animated switcher, you're switching straight out you're getting rid of the first container and then replacing it with something else entirely, which you could do if it's a row with your two items. But if you want to actually slide out and reveal something, you're probably going to want to have a stack with the second one ready, and then maybe use an animated container. And word of the wise, don't use an animated size for this. It does funky things that we don't have time to go into. It won't look the way you want.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, the problem here is animate switcher is definitely not what you want. There is because it's just about switching between two widgets. You could switch between one widget and the view of two widgets, but I don't think it depends on what the transition is that you want it for. Is it like what sort of reveal or transition you're looking for? Because if you want one to stand screen and move over, and then the other one to reveal itself or something like that, that's more of you might as well just have one always on the screen and have an animate container wrapping the right hand side one, and that gets larger.
So the one's covering the other, and it just. And the reason I'm saying all this is I'm keying in on the word reveal. Okay, if you wanted to replace, then I'd go animated switcher. All right.
There is also, I want to mention quickly, just before we go, Flutter Animate, just recently by G Skinner. This has huge impacts on this. This has lots of really cool animations that you can apply and all sorts of funky chaining effects with. And this might also be an easy way to accomplish the type of animation you want. So just go take a look. I don't know if it will, but take a look.
Okay. It's also really good if you were scared of all the different things about an animation, like an animation controller, an animation widget, things like that. It really just literally text dot fade in, and you're done. Or text dot animate dot fade in.
What it actually does is it actually return that fading function returns the animate widget, and then the child of the animate widget is the one that comes in. Use extension methods to really good advantage. So
really slick design, extremely slick design.
Okay. Do you think developer source of Google is enough to maintain Flutter for several or a lot of platforms? If I understand this correctly, do they basically, are there enough people to keep Flutter going for all these platforms is what I'm understanding. And the thing is even if Google were to walk away right now, Flutter's got enough momentum.
Yep.
and enough contributors
I
that
was gonna
it's
say,
not
two
going
things. There's also the fact that they're hiring lots more people at the moment, particularly to solve this
They're
kind of
still
thing.
hiring right now.
They
were
want
just talking
people that
about
are
that.
specific. Yeah, they want people that are there's job positions that are about knowing stuff about each of the individual platforms and being more specific in those roles. And then conversely, obviously, as Scott was saying, that if there's plenty of people that could be in plenty of companies, there's already so much momentum that people will pick up that slack. So I wouldn't push on it too much. All right. Here's one. So I'm just picking one at random. How to disable tree shaking for specific.
There are 3 questions that have the same answer. Okay, how do you disable tree shaking? How do you write an entire website in Flutter? And how do you construct a complex app using getX? And the answer for all 3, I believe, is don't.
Yeah. How to set you don't. It doesn't work. And also, why would you want to? There's literally no reason to disable tree shaking. If you're having a problem with tree shaking, you've got a problem with your code. That's what that boils down to.
And the tree shaking really is just supposed to be removing code that you're not using. So as Simon said, if it's removing code you're using,
is it from a library as well? It's like, well, it doesn't remove it from the library. It's when you compile the library into your end product that removes it. Like, I don't know. Doesn't make sense.
Another obfuscation with API keys question. Is using the Flutter build obfuscate enough?
So Google Secrets Manager. I don't even know what Google Secrets Manager is. Let me just be key here. So obfuscation is obfuscating the types and the variable names from your code. I wanted to go back up, but so that's what the obfuscate part of the command does. The obfuscation itself is just the technique of hiding in plain sight, almost, right? So what you actually want to do with your API keys, if you do want to hide them from being detected, is to just ship a hard-coded AES key, 128 bits. It's just like some, I don't know, 16 random bytes or random hex digits, and then just encrypt your keys and decrypt them at runtime, and you just ship the encrypted key as a list of integers inside your app. There you go. What you've just made is impossible to statically analyze and remove your API key from your source code. But all strings that are in Dart do not get encrypted or cryptoed in any way when you obfuscate. That's not how it works. So your API keys will not be secure in that sense. But neither are they secure anyway. So your API key is sent over web transactions. It's sent there. It's meant to be pushed to the client. What you should be doing is rotating your API keys and doing other measures to get around that. But anything runs on the client device is subject to them having access to it. So just obfuscation just hides. It doesn't protect.
I will soon start my first Flutter tablet specific app for a few dozen users of a company. Any advice what to look for when ordering physical test devices? Well, there's a couple of things before Simon gets started. Couple of interesting things. If you're doing this on the company's money, have a good time. Order a lot of fun stuff. If you're trying to do this out of your own pocket, I would use device preview instead of buying physical devices, at least for a while until you're sure that what you've got is going to work right. This is a really handy thing. Basically, it puts a fake device inside of your other device. And what I do with this for fun actually is I'll create a Pixel C AVD. And then in the Pixel C, which is huge, I can run this and put whatever else I want in it. And it hasn't cost me anything. So, but again, if you're spending the company's money, use all that budget.
We see it only for a few dozen users of a company. Yeah. And the answer to this is if he's trying to test what devices they already use, would be my first point. And if they don't already devices, then go find a device and order your few dozen of those devices, because that's what we're going to use at the end of the day, and build for that one device, right? Because then you don't have any problems. And so you've got fast development cycle, you're only having to deal with one screen size, one screen aspect ratio, everything else. done, right? Like you can later on, once you've got your initial release out, if they want to support more devices, if they want to do this, then you can iterate on that and improve on it. But to be honest, go find a reasonable mid-level Android tablet, and you don't need to go for the Samsung Galaxies or the Pixel devices or anything expensive. Just mid-range Android device will run Flutter apps just fine.
One other thing real quick, Christian, Simon and I were talking about this the other day. We can't remember where you sent your information.
Yeah,
so
if you
please reach out to us again with your contact info.
Yeah. So, yeah.
All right.
Right. Come, more questions.
I'm coming. Okay, here's one about refactoring. This is also a more beginner question. What does refactoring apply to when someone tells you need to refactor the models or the entities? A model is like person class, has name, age, address, dog name, stuff like that. That's your model. So
I think I know what this question refers to here. I think there's a subtlety in the details.
Okay.
So when you refactor, normally it's just like renaming and restructuring, right? So when they're saying you need to refactor the models and entities, they want you to work out how those models and entities are being used, and is there a better way that they can be reconstructed to, essentially maybe new models created, deleted, changed, edited in some fashion. They're just saying you need to review all the models and entities and work out how they should be now used, probably. If you had a code review and if I had a code review and I said, oh no, you need to refactor those models and entities, I'll be telling them that they need to, what they've currently got there, that model, the structure that they're doing with just doesn't work for, I'll normally explain a reason, and then you should go away and rethink your process in which you're combining those models and entities together, probably. So yeah, that's what I think that means. That helps you. Again, a lot of the time, like we talk about like words like refactor, it's like that has a certain meaning to us, and it's like to most people they're like, what? It's like I always thought like if the FBI were ever like listening into one of the phone calls, we're like, oh, did you kill the child and reparent it? You're like, whoa, whoa, yeah. You'd be just like, honestly, you'll be like, what the hell? You didn't mean it that way, right? Like, but like. Yeah.
And if you're shaking your head at his, you should hear our dinner conversation around this house. Okay, I just lost the next question, but I will get it back in a moment. Aha. Do we have a mono repo workspace management in Flutter like NX JavaScript? I could reuse a lot of code. I see Mason, but it still doesn't work like NX. Simon, would that possibly be a...
Yeah. I was thinking monorepo workspace management tool is Melos, is the current I think I'd say gold standard. It helps in terms of managing the package and dependencies and running tests over all your packages, all these fun things that you want to do. I've never used NX, so I couldn't tell you if this matches what your query is, but I think that this is what you're looking for. The package is called Melos, and you can do Dart pub global activate Melos, and it's on your command line. You can just use it.
Yeah, there's a great article on this. There's a great article on this in the Code Magic blog. If you follow the Code Magic people, they have a blog, and they just talked about this in a full article. So it's a really good thing to check out.
There you go.
Very cool. When's the next London meetup?
Yeah, we're trying for monthly. Sign up to the meetup group, and we'll be pushing out notifications on there. That's it. And the Twitter account, Flutter London. There you go.
As soon as they can invite the king, when they can invite the king, and he can show up next meeting.
We see a lot of questions over and over again. Why isn't this part of the framework? Why isn't that part of the framework? And it's part of the reason is they're trying to keep it to a minimum, because every time you put something in, then it has to be maintained, et cetera, et cetera. And also the framework is supposed to be a framework that you put more complicated things on. This one's a little interesting. Code generation with a package freezed and the package JSON serializable is very useful, but versions keep changing the syntax. So why isn't this part of the framework.
So why don't we have this out-of-the-box functionality? So the answer to that is actually what they were alluding to in the conversation there. The upcoming macro support will fix this problem.
Okay.
But it's a way off, right?
So they're putting it in the Dart framework.
It's going to in the Dart language itself, and then this will be everyone can take advantage of this mechanism of code generation during build time, right? Like this solves that kind of problem. But it's
they don't have one. They don't have one yet because they haven't decided on a state management solution to build those in.
Right, come on.
We seem to have lost Randall.
Come on. Right.
Okay. What? Okay. Basically, what can you do to improve on the website content, the Flutter Dart community, forum discussions, resource? I would go to flutter.dev/community. The links there will take you to all kinds of stuff, and also go to the Flutter community Medium publication. Well over, I mean, last time I counted was 1,200 articles we had, and I counted last year. So I really, I don't, and there's so much content out there. It's insane. On YouTube, there's ResoCoder. Pawan changed his from MTech Viral to Codepurs, CODEPUR. Oh my God, Code with Andrea. There are so many of them. Go ahead, Simon.
No, I was just going to say, I'm just looking at the most. I just realized I haven't looked at the stats for the Flutter community Medium, and we're now sitting on 398,000. So let's say round up 400,000 views every month.
Wow,
that slipped quite a bit. That slipped quite a bit.
That's still no. This is about on average. It's still good, but 600,000 minutes read every month.
Yep.
And that is every quarter. That's 1.7 million minutes read every quarter.
Wow.
And that counts for roughly the same around 1 million views every quarter. So that's a really, really big number. Not to be.
Very cool.
Anyway, yeah. So that's.
I'm not sure if this one's a misunderstanding or not. I'd like to adopt Firebase, but can't because it doesn't work on Windows or Linux desktop.
Yep.
Intel.
You've got the problem is you can make it work on those platforms, but it depends on what bits of the APIs you're using and how you're using them. But frankly, they don't have support for Flutter on desktop yet, and they're working towards it, but it's a long way off. And they actually mentioned this in the panel at Flutter Vikings. So if you want to go to the day 2 Valhalla, the very end of the day on this YouTube channel, you'll find the panel that the Flutter team had before the end of the show. They do mention that they're working towards it, and we'll see where it goes. There is currently a C++ library for Flutter for Firebase that you can go integrate with your desktop apps if you so want to, but it's not the same obviously as doing it yourself. Also, there's the Google APIs package on Pub that actually enables you to use Firestore, and I've used that on desktop applications with Flutter desktop application. Again, it's not the same API. So what I'm saying is over here you go Google APIs, and there's a bunch of APIs you can use, including the Cloud Firestore. As you hear that you should create one of these instances of Firestore API. I won't go into how you do all this, but I just want to show you what you actually get here is, as you can see, the databases, documents, collections, whatever else. The documents endpoint lets you query, commit a document, create a document, delete, get a document, but the way you do it and the path that you give is not the standard. This is the underlying API behind Firebase Firestore. So yeah, you could still do it in Dart, but it's not the same. That's the best I could say right now. Like soon, eventually, but not now. So
gotcha. Let's see here.
I think we just lost the question.
I just took that one down, I do believe. Here, this is an interesting and strange one. I want to monetize my project. I'd like to open source it and get help, but also you don't want others to use it for their gain. It kind of defeats the whole thing about having, it sounds like you want free labor, but not let them use it. And
I mean, there are non-permissive licenses in open source, but there's no way you're going to stop people from using code if they want to, right? Like if you're giving people the code, you don't know if they use it in their product or not at the end of the day, right? So it just feels like if you're trying to prevent people from earning money off your project, that's a non-commercial license, and there's plenty of those out there, and you can go do that. In fact, I would go look at the what's it called? Not copyleft. What's it called? Copyleft.
Syncfusion? No, not Syncfusion's license. No.
Oh, this is gonna bug the hell out of me. It just literally just left me.
The LGPL.
No, the simple permissive licenses, commercial, non-share alike. Hang on, let's find it.
Oh, it's CCNA.
Yeah. Creative Commons. That's the one. Yeah.
Creative Commons.
Okay. So I think this is probably what you're looking for. The Creative Commons. I know I do not want to join your mailing list or do this. Go away. Attribution, non-commercial, basically saying that they can copy and redistribute your material on any medium in any format, and they can remix, transform, adapt, and build upon it. But they cannot revoke these. But they must give you credit, and they cannot make commercial money off of your product. And this is the kind of license I think you're looking for, by the sounds of it. And this is perfectly reasonable. I've done this in use this license in some of the stuff that I've done. So I'll pop that in the chat, and then you can go follow up on that on your own. But that's what I'd recommend, probably.
I do have to say that on Floss Weekly, we've had a couple of experts that say precisely that the equivalent of OSI licenses aren't equivalent enough. That CC is not meant to be applied to software.
Yeah. I don't know, but there are some
good start.
There are some open source licenses the same. I can't remember which of is it Apache or the BSD license that is you can use in commercial. What's the
almost all the OSI all the OSI licenses don't have a commercial clause because that's against the OSI standard.
Yeah, I seem to remember that there's a couple, but yeah, I mean,
yeah. Anyway. We beat it. We beat it to death. Next.
Yep. The horse is dead, bones, dust.
Yes.
So, okay.
And copyrighted.
Would it be useful to provide feedback on the developer experience setting Flutter up on Windows? If so, where or how should people provide it? Well, wrong thing. Sorry, wrong button. There is a gentleman who is in charge of the developer experience team right now, especially with things like UX. His name's Dao Dong, and you can reach him via Twitter with that. I actually have been waiting for a response from someone else on his team, but I have not heard back from them yet. But they want feedback on everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can always raise a ticket, right, on the Flutter repo and then reference that. Documentation is always something that they try and improve on, and there's several issue tickets that relate around documentation, and I'd see that as a documentation, the developer setup experience. But sadly, it's not difficult to set up, right? If your system is a fresh system, as soon as you start going, I've got multiple versions of Android Studio, and I can't get plugins working here or that. That's specific to your setup, and there's no answer that can be put in general documentation to solve that. It's about your specific setup, and sadly, that's just the way development is. Because when you're doing development, you have specific changes to the system you probably need to make to support development on that platform. Yeah,
it's almost to the point where if someone has 3 or 4 different copies and versions of the Java SDK, I think I might rather be hung by my toenails than try to get everything installed and straightened out on that machine. So yeah,
I remember. I'm going to just remark that me and Scott did in 2019. We did a workshop, 25 people. We spent half the day getting all 25 people. These were previously Android/iOS developers, getting them all set up with Flutter, and it kind of like it defeated half. Half the workshop time is just gone. That's just trying to get everyone ready to follow along with the workshop. So just
And to everyone who sees this even in the future, please understand one thing. If you are going to a workshop on Flutter, you are expected to have installed and run the counter app before you walk in that door. It is not fair to everybody else in there for us to sit around waiting for you to install when they've already gone to the work first. So, and when they've done the work first. So we have two possible things there. Either A, you make the whole workshop something that can be done in Dartpad where people can't install it, but not everyone's got those skills. Or number two, tell the people who didn't install, you're going to have to sit there and take notes and do it later, but I'm not going to short these other people because you didn't bother getting prepared.
I probably, if I was to do a workshop now, I'd probably use Zap as my go-to platform of choice. So it's more comprehensive than Dartpad. You can custom packages and all sorts of things. But again, the problem is you want to give the end student the experience of using the actual software, and if they're not using the actual IDE and everything else, they're going to get lost when they go from like Dartpad/Zap and they start using it on their real system with the full suite of utilities. So yeah. Anyway, let's go on. Next question.
Okay, I'm just trying to remember the name of this one. Is it possible to write complex apps in Flutter that utilize all the sensors, blah, blah, blah? Simon, what was that one that we used for smooth rotation?
Began
with an S,
I forget. Think. Well, let me go look at the smooth rotation dependencies.
Sensors plus.
No, there is Sensors Plus, though. You're right. There is Sensor Plus.
There's Sensors Plus. So this is basically, Elvis, this is going to come down to using a package for the sensors. It's not really the UI toolkit's job. It's a package.
I do want to cover a couple of things here quickly. So let me bring up my screen quickly. This is not just for. So we do a library called Smooth Rotation, and the library you're thinking of is
this code does not work right now. Don't try.
Yeah, it's old. So the package was Arium Sensor, which I think is whatever it is. I think this is the.
Now I have
this was 3 years old, so it's longer in the tooth now. But this does some stuff. Now the one that you actually think of is this Sensors Plus. There's always all sensors here. A bunch of other
35 days ago.
Always sensor packages, right? But Sensors Plus is probably the one you're looking for. But this has underlying. It gives you the events for the gyroscope, magnet monitor, and accelerometer. It doesn't give you the rotation vector, which is probably what you're looking for. Perhaps you don't have to do the math yourself. That's where this one came in. But the overall, there's also the where package, and the where package is. Will give you sort of like integration with where, so you get like ambient feedback and the watch screen size, but it's just the basics, right? So it doesn't give you sensors. So I think, if you're looking for specific sensors, go look for a package for it. If you don't, you can easily create your own package. You go to there's actually Flutter Create -T plugin. And I'll give you the template for the plugin. And there's lots of guides here under packaging plugins, developing packaging plugins, all about how you can just make your own. There you go, package for this, and then there's another one for making.
Okay, we're kind of getting sidetracked. We got 4 left, and we're over.
Yeah, let's go.
So, let's see here. Here's a quick one for you. How can we detect volume button pressed, Android and iOS?
You can't. There you go. So on the back, it just says on the background, right? Like if
Well, I mean,
there's global. Actually, so there is. So what you can do. So let me be clear. You're asking about an Android iOS problem. You go just asking the Android iOS way because there are certain things you can do. As far as I'm aware, on iOS you can't do this. On Android, you can make a foreground service, and this is all Android code, right? This is nothing to do with Flutter or whatever, right? You can just create a foreground service, start that up from the Flutter code if you want to, and then that can monitor the media intents that go out about the media keys that press. This is like the same type of volume on your headset or volume on a Bluetooth or something like that. And that does the volume on the side of the thing, on the side of your device. However, your app is in your foreground and your Flutter app is visible. You what you want is to look at the hardware keyboard. What's it called? Hardware keyboard listener. And the hardware. I need to cover this because this is what's it called? Keyboard. Come on, where is it? Yeah, here we go. So there's a class in services called hardware keyboard. Hardware keyboard, you can add a listener. It's simply got an add listener, remove listener on it somewhere on the instance, and then that allows you to. Raw keyboard. I think it's raw keyboard. Raw keyboard has a add listener. And you get your raw keyboard events. In those keyboard events, you'll get like on key down and in key down. Come on, or key up or whatever. When it loads, there we go. You'll get your keyboard, physical keyboard key and logical keyboard key, and these will have there's a bunch of constants here, and you'll find that there's a volume down, volume and volume up, and that's how you can get if the hardware keys have been pressed whilst your app is active.
Very cool. All right, about knowing native code, I'm unsure what to learn between Java and Kotlin. Is there a reason to pick one or the other? Now, first thing, if you really Java and Kotlin are compiling pretty much to an interpreted set of code, bytecode. And so if you really, really want to go native, then the only way to go is assembly. Okay, that's native. But
assembly C or C++, right?
But the thing is Java and Kotlin, Kotlin's newer. Android people love Kotlin, and Hadi Hariris are really cool, dude.
If I was to answer this, I'd say Kotlin first.
Yeah.
Kotlin is built on the JVM, which is the Java Virtual Machine, which is the same as Java was originally designed for. And there's the syntax to Kotlin is nearer to Dart and Swift, and you're going to get along with it way better. The end result is the same. But if you need to modify Java code, you need to modify Java code. That's what you're doing. So
Yeah. Alrighty. 2 left, and boy, are we late. I think the quicker one is it possible to support discriminated unions? I've never heard of it. Is that like sealed unions? No.
I'm thinking sealed unions here, like.
Yeah, that's the only unions I'm aware of, and that's done by a package. Risocoder did a video on that, I believe. But yeah, and there are certain packages out there that give you the equivalents of things like data classes and sealed unions. I think Remy worked on one at one point, didn't he?
So I was just reading what discriminated unions are. I'll look at this F# thing just to see what it says they are, just so I can answer the question. It provides support for values that can be one of a number of named cases, possibly each with different values and types. Yeah, sealed union.
Okay, so it's sealed union. Okay. Yeah, there are packages that will allow
there are
you
packages
to do that.
for that. Yeah.
I've got a PT appointment to go to, so I'm cutting out slightly early. Great being with you guys.
One question
again.
left. We're fine.
See you next week. Oh, okay, great. All right, bye.
Bye.
So, okay. There we go. And the last one, which really, I'm not sure how applicable it is, but is there a library in Python?
No, not
is there. I'm sorry. There is a Python library that you want to use in a Flutter app. Can you use it via FFI?
That's a good question. last time I remembered, you can compile Python, can't you? Let's just see. Python compile to shared library.
And if you asked a question and it has not been answered yet, it's probably because you asked it well after the cutoff. Yeah, we've been at it for over 2 hours, and actually I had promised the boss, also known as the lady of the house, that I would have cut it by 90 minutes.
Okay, so apparently there's a Python C API, and if you use that, pop that in the chat. If you use that in your library, then you can use Python as a library from inside your C++ application. So yes, the answer to that is yes. So I popped the link in the chat to the API. I don't know if that's the most recent documentation, but I'm sure you can find it. It says it's old, so I'm sure you can go find the most recent version. Oh no, there's the most recent version there. I'm going to bring this up on stream briefly, just since one last question. There you go. So Python C reference manual. Who want to write extensions and modules to embed Python, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to embed Python into your Dart application, essentially. Yeah, so there's obviously ways in here, examples. I don't know. Yeah. Oh, fun things. Yeah. So this is just like trying to find your actual structures and using them. I'm sure there's fun ways, but yes, there's ways of doing that apparently.
Flutter is for web apps, not for websites.
Oh, for what question?
Just in general. And the other nice thing about that is that pretty much helps solve the how do I do SEO in Flutter? Don't. Make your web app in Flutter, make your website with something else, drop your web app in it, and worry about the SEO somewhere else. And one other real quick one. When will Rust become mainstream by Google? You have no idea how many things in Google are running on a backbone of Rust. One of them, take a look at the Fuchsia repo. So
I think the thing is, it's like, well, when will it? Well, when will it? Never. I mean, when will it? Always. I mean, like I can't. No one can predict the future, right? So it's like, I think the point is, it use whatever you need to use to make everything work. I mean, if there's no reason to change to Rust, why change to Rust, right? No reason to change to Dart, don't change to Dart. Right? Simple.
All right. You know what? This actually was a really good show, and I'm glad to see that Paul agrees. Thank you, Paul, for setting that up. And with that, it's 2:14. Okay, well, my time. We're 2 hours and 14 minutes in. How's that? And yes,
John who's there.
And for those who don't know, John Weiss is the man who started the project to put Flutter on both screens of a Microsoft Duo. So, yeah.
Cool. Right. Well, thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
We're out. Almost.